So the long-serving commander of the Blood Angels has got a shiny new model and a shiny new datasheet with a few extra boosted rules to go along with it. Let's look over the new rules and how Dante fares in 40k in general. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're reviewing another Games Workshop datasheet. We've recently had a new one for Lionel Johnson, and it does look like alongside Azrael, we've also got an updated Primaris version of Commander Dante as well. I guess it's possible that this guy might well be the very last person to receive a datasheet for 9th edition. Let's talk briefly about the new model, the new rules, how much damage you can expect out of this guy, and how good he is in a 40k Blood Angels army at the moment. So first up, Dante is the long-lived chapter master of the Blood Angels. He's been recently guarding the Imperium Nihilus against Chaos and Xenos threats, and it looks like he might be getting his new model at this point, as he's tying in a little bit lore-wise to the Arcs of Omen. It sounds like he might be one of the first ones to meet up with Lionel Johnson. His new model leaked early recently, due to Games Workshop accidentally shipping it to someone. In general, the miniature's gone down really quite nicely though, a lot more dynamic than the absolutely ancient model that he was lumbered with for quite some time, soaring through the air and blasting people with his shiny new Inferno pistol. Otherwise fairly well faithful to the previous miniature, complete with death mask, golden sculpted abs and armour with toes. We now know his pre-order price will be £27.50, €35 or $45 if you were looking to pick him up. It's going on sale this weekend. I think his price is kind of in line with other Space Marine characters from Games Workshop, though I do generally think that these are a bit on the pricey side for single infantry miniatures. If you were looking to pick him up, then Element Games in the UK should have him, as would Noble Knight Games in the USA. Both of those have affiliate links that are links down in the video description, and can be a way to save a bit of money compared with buying directly from Games Workshop. With the new miniature comes some new rules though. This datasheet is the revised version of the Blood Angels commander. Broadly quite a lot of it's the same, and I don't think it really needed updating, but he's gained a bunch of other stuff, including buffed stats, a pistol with a beam rule, and the Primaris keyword, though it has come at a small points cost increase. Points-wise, Commander Dante has risen to 175 points now. Previously it was 165, so it's gone up 10. Not exactly the most massive points change in the world, to be honest. I feel like it's kind of in line with his increased abilities. In general, I wouldn't say he's massively stronger or weaker due to these changes. It more or less balances out, and he was kind of good before. In terms of his stats and increased abilities, he still remains an HQ choice for the Blood Angels. He's a jump pack infantry character with a 12-inch move, but just in general with the Primaris upgrade, he's a bit more all-round mighty, 7 wounds and 7 attacks, whereas previously he had 6 of each. A little bit harder to kill, a little bit more damage out of him there. In terms of his other defences, he still has his 2+ Artificer armor save, plus a 4+ Invul from his Iron Halo. To help out on the durability front, he has also gained the Primaris keyword now. That means that if you wanted for 1 CP, you could potentially have him only wounded on a 4+. Really quite a powerful toughness boost against the field, particularly when you're only toughness 4. It would also allow him to use Gene Wrought Might as well, the ones where 6s to hit auto wound. The only other major change for him is that he appears to have acquired himself a named pistol now. Previously he just had a standard issue 6-inch Inferno pistol, still really quite threatening if you get close and get within melter range, but now this has been upgraded to something called the Perdition pistol, a 9-inch range single shot gun that has the beam type special rule. You get to target an enemy unit, and everything along the line also gets hit as well if you hit the first time. It means that in theory, if your opponent's been very obliging and lined up multiple units for you and you manage to get in close, you might well be able to skewer multiple units with the melter shot. Kind of fun if it happens, though I feel like it's maybe a bit of a gimmick and not really the main focus of where it's going to be moving. I'd say perhaps the actual powerful boost that it's got here is getting its range increased to 9 inches, which is pretty handy. He still won't be able to fire it out of deep strike or anything though, but as he's bounding towards the enemy on his jump pack should give him a slightly better choice of targets, I suppose. The other thing as well is that the melter rule seems to just kick in all the time now. It always gets d6 plus 2 damage, even when it's all the way out to 9-inch range. That's really quite nice. It means it's not really a gun that you can just completely ignore. Just one shot through armor could potentially be doing up to 8 wounds worth of damage, which is pretty brutal. Otherwise, one change that I was sort of expecting might happen was that he might be able to get a damage 3 power axe. It seems that Games Workshop have been happy enough that his melee is kind of threatening already. The Axe Mortalis remains strength plus 3, AP 3 and damage 2. I thought there was at least a reasonable chance that it might go to damage 3 after the upgrade of High Marshal Helbrecht and Azrael, both of whom got damage 3 weapons when they got their Primaris upgrade. To be fair to him, he still does hit really quite hard given the Blood Angels chapter tactic. He is swinging with a whole bunch of attacks with that, and if they had made it damage 3, they likely would have increased his points cost as well. I suspect that he would have been a good deal more than 175. Still though, just a little bit disappointed they didn't do that. I feel like it would have been quite cool to have him be an absolute melee monster powerhouse. He is the chapter master of the Blood Angels after all, freshly upgraded to Primaris form, even if he is a bit on the old side. Otherwise, for his special rules and other abilities, not really much has changed. Again, like Azrael, I feel like just leaving these alone was probably the sensible thing to do. Most of it's kind of handy, and seeing as Dante was already being played in competitive lists, it's hard to argue that they needed to mess around with too much. In terms of his abilities, he gets the Death Mask of Sanguinius, -1 to hit both at range and in melee, so a nice little survivability boost there. He's got his Iron Halo as mentioned. He's the Lord Regent of the Imperium Nihilus, so if he's your Warlord, you get an extra command point. Quite a nice little thing to sweeten the value proposition there. He has his Chapter Master rerolls, the standard Captain rerolls, and then he gets a rule called Epic Hero of the Imperium, allowing you to do a single 0 CP epic deed stratagem, such as fighting in death when he gets killed. Overall, he's had a nice few buffs there, better stratagem access, more attacks in melee, more wounds in defense, and his pistol is a lot more dangerous than before. I feel like overall that probably adds up to around about 10 points worth of value, maybe more, and I feel like he is going to continue to be a pretty solid choice for the Blood Angels. Currently at the moment he does star in at least a fair few competitive lists. He's got pretty decent melee and is very fast with it. The free fights on death or Angel Sacrifice certainly helps. I feel like the Chapter Master rerolls are pretty handy for Blood Angels as well. They've got lots of jump pack units that might want to go venturing off on their own. He could potentially throw the full Chapter Master rerolls on something like Death Company or a Sanguinary Guard unit, and then not have to worry about them keeping within aura range as they go charging off later in the turn. On the flip side of that though, he could buff one unit with his rerolls and then keep another unit nearby. If he's your nominated Warlord, Sanguinary Guard get a +1 to hit within 6 inches, and that pairs quite nicely with his Rites of War. They'll usually be hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s with all of those nasty attacks. I feel like a lot of people will want to nominate him as their designated Warlord as well, just for the CP. Then whether or not you actually buy in his Warlord trait with it is a bit more of another question. I have seen lists that both do and don't do this. The extra 9-inch aura of rerolls for the Rites of War and the Chapter Master buff are both kind of handy though. Between all of this, it does seem to be enough to get him the nod in quite a lot of Blood Angels lists, though currently Blood Angels are maybe having a slightly rough time of it, around about 45%-ish win rate, definitely on the lower end of Warhammer 40k, though maybe not quite as bad as some. If you do take him along, then here's just a very rough idea of what his damage output might be now he's got his Primaris upgrade. With the big movement, I feel like there's a pretty reasonable chance that he's both going to get to shoot his pistol and then follow it up with a charge. So here are some numbers just in the Assault Doctrine, presuming he's using his Chapter Master rerolls on some other units, not himself. If you're going into either Space Marines or Guardsmen, the results seem to be the same at the moment. Wounding on +1 to wound with the Chapter Tactic is pretty brutal, and he'll be AP -4 in the Assault Doctrine. On average, including the pistol, he kills either 7 Space Marines or 7 Guardsmen, only around 2 or 3 dead Terminators though, as the damage 2 axe just doesn't go quite as well into them. Pretty brutal to things like Toughness 7 vehicles, where he'll still be wounding on 3s due to the Blood Angels chapter tactic, but against harder targets and things with -1 damage he might really quite struggle. Say for example a Plague Burst Crawler with Toughness 8, a 5+ Invul and -1 damage, he really is quite weedy against that. It's a bad target for multiple reasons, and he only manages 4 wounds. In general, if he can, I think he usually wants to be going after 2 wound infantry, and also he'd like to avoid things with -1 damage or toughness 8 if possible. In terms of other things to get more out of him, the chapter tactic for +1 to wound still means he's very good at dealing out a fair bit of damage to most targets. The worst he'll usually be wounding on is a 4, and the Assault Doctrine for the extra AP and extra attack is handy as well. He might be able to get a little bit of use out of buffing characters, things like the Sanguinary Priest for Feel No Pain and Healing, though I think often they'd want to be targeting things like the actual squads for that, and he could be run in tag team alongside a Sanguinary Ancient maybe, with the jump pack Wrath of Baal for the extra +2 to movement. You could maybe get a bit more out of him with things like Librarians and Chaplains as well, spells like Might of Heroes or various chaplain listeners could also be useful. In general though, I'd say that any buffs that he gets are kind of opportunistic as opposed to the main target that you want to be dealing with buffs, but I think it's fairly conceivable he could be running alongside these other characters, buffing some Sanguinary Guard as they go. In terms of stratagems, he's got a fair bit more choice now. Both Transhuman Physiology and Gene-Wrought Might are pretty welcome additions. Transhuman Physiology is generally great value, and if it is going to make the difference between him living and dying, then that's really quite a big deal. Gene-Wrought Might, I guess, might help him punch up a little bit against things like Toughness 8 units. I guess if you did even combine your Chapter Master style rerolls on him, you could just reroll everything that isn't a 6 and hopefully get a few more auto wounds. Against most targets though, it's not super exciting. He is going to be wounding a whole bunch of things on a 2+ anyway. Perhaps the most interesting things are his 3 epic deeds. 2 CP to fight in death is really quite handy. You won't be able to if he's already fought, but potentially if your opponent's trying to charge and kill him in their turn, then all well and good. And it could be kind of interesting if you think that it's worth sacrificing him late in the game. Could allow some interesting plays. On a similar kind of note, maybe the other most interesting epic deed that he could use for free is Angel's Sacrifice. That's the slightly unusual Blood Angels one, where a character jumps in the way and the enemy has to target them with all their attacks. So say if Dante was charging alongside some Sanguinary Guard, if the opponent interrupted, they'd be forced to hit him. Often not going to be ideal, but say if he only had 1 wound left anyway, you might force the opponents to massively overkill him and leave your dangerous squad still to strike. Otherwise can definitely get some good value out of rerolls for charges, saves if it's going to make a difference, or potentially either wound or damage rolls for that pistol. It is pretty potent. In game, and with the current unit balance of Blood Angels, I feel like it's usually going to be seen leading several squads of Sanguinary Guard into the fray. Maybe not the worst thing, as he is the actual chapter master after all. He works well with Death Company and Vanguard veterans as well. I feel like he's definitely a character who's got a lot of options. You could potentially fire and forget some rerolls off to a squad that you think might be killed in return next turn, send them off with the rerolls to go and destroy something, and then maybe it won't matter too much if they're super out of position at the next turn. When he does hit combat, maybe being charging alongside a Sanguinary Guard squad for the +1 to hit and the rerolls will be a good idea. And then usually I think he'd want to be charging something that's toughness 7 or under, and avoiding things like 3 wound infantry or -1 damage, who will be a bit less efficient against. As mentioned, he's definitely got options if you think that he might be about to die. Both Angel's Sacrifice and the Fights on Death thing are both nice. Otherwise, for variant Blood Angels lists, I've seen other people use a tooled up Chapter Master, with choices like Thunderhammers and Storm Shields, and various choices of relics and warlord traits. I feel like those have some positives and negatives. I guess they'd be a decent amount cheaper now that Dante's gone up a bit. Perhaps the biggest selling point are things like warlord traits such as Rites of War maybe, or potentially Soul Warden to prevent against some mortal wounds. I still think Dante competes very solidly against them though, between all the other things that he does, just being generally pretty mighty. Having that command point and the stratagem stuff does help out. Otherwise could just stick to buffing characters like the Sanguinary Priests and Ancients. That could also be a very decent way to go as well. Overall though, I do think he's strong enough to be still considered pretty competitive in a Blood Angels army. I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say though down in the comments. Do you think the new Dante is stronger or weaker? And how tempted would you be to put his fun new model on the tabletop with these new stats? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that links down in the video description if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.